This is the Parents in Sport podcast. Amazing guests, honest conversations, topics that matter.
Welcome to season 2 of the Parents in Sport podcast. I am your host, Gordon MacLelland, and I'm delighted to be joined today by sports psychologist and author Josephine Perry. Josie, thank you for joining us on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited about today's episode, and particularly talking about the amazing book that you have written, I Can, the Teenage Athlete's Guide to Mental Fitness. But before we dig into that, Josie, can you just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your background?
I have a very strange background. I didn't really do sport as a kid. I did ballet and tap and jazz and drama. I was like proper stage school brat. I got into sport a little bit at university. I did rowing and sailing, and then started doing running, kind of race for life kind of events with friends. And then eventually found myself in triathlon, which is what I still do 15 years later. So a little bit of a sporting background now. And then work-wise, I actually began as a journalist, and my first day of work was the day the Monica Lewinsky story broke, and I was working in Washington, DC as an intern on that day. So it was a really cool kind of intro to this is what a newsroom does. So I loved doing that. Eventually found my way into PR and communications, and I did that for 15 years, and then had a bit of an epiphany, I guess, when I was doing an Ironman race in 2013 about the impact the brain could actually have on our performance rather than just expecting our body to do everything for us. And from that, a bit dramatic, but I quit my job. I went to do a conversion course in psychology. I did a master's in sport and exercise psychology. And then I did 2.5 years of training, supervised to practice, to become a sports psychologist.
Fantastic. I mean, what a journey that is. There's a lot to draw upon there. Absolutely fantastic. So your current role at the moment as a sports psychologist, and you've written this amazing book, which I'm really keen that our listeners get to hear about, because I know as a parent myself, reading the book, I read through it and thought, wow, yeah, this is so useful. And a bit like I know you've said in the past, it's probably one of those areas that we maybe neglect a little bit. We often think about lots of things, technical, tactical, and then sometimes we actually forget the sort of greater picture around people. So what inspired you to actually sort of put pen to paper on this particular topic?
I guess when I went into sports psychology, very naively, and to be fair, I did no research, so I kind of just threw myself in, probably not in the best way, without having done all the research with how it works. I assumed I might be working with elite athletes, and then actually you start working in this world and you realise there are very few elite athletes in the UK. And actually most of my clients were either older people, 30s, 40s, 50s, who wanted to enjoy their sport more and having a specific barrier holding them back. But the biggest cohort of people that need sports psychology help are actually teenagers, because they are usually trying to do way too much at the same time. Many of the athletes I see are perfectionistic, so they are trying to be brilliant at school and get high grades. They usually play a musical instrument as well. They're trying to be amazing in one of the many sports that they play. And surprisingly, it's not possible to do everything brilliantly all at the same time. And so I was working with lots of those young performers who were trying to do too much, sucking a load of the joy out of it. The high performance that they were aiming for was not always going to be possible. There is no perfect. And if you're aiming for perfect, you're always going to be disappointed. And so it ended up with this kind of, I call it a well-being gap between where you think you should be able to get to and where you really are. And most of the people I see, I guess, as a sports psych, they're not coming to learn the good mental skills you need. They're coming to because they feel there's some kind of barrier that they they need fixed. And so I can to help break down some of those barriers that they felt, but also to be really accessible to the kids that are never going to see a sports psychologist because they haven't got a great big problem, but could actually thrive if they understood more of the techniques that help you enjoy the process more, and the ways to get more of yourself, or to get better out of yourself.
Yeah, and I think the book does just a brilliant job at that. You know, I think that when you read through it, that idea that you just feel like you're being helped, and you talk through things that you would see in everyday life, and you think, oh, yeah, hang on, actually, that's quite useful. And the nice thing is, yes, it was sports-based, but actually I was sat there reading it thinking, oh, yes, Gordon, you could be a little bit better at that. And actually, you could do with thinking about that.
Yeah.
And I really like that. And I think when I read it, I then felt that actually this is what makes this a really good piece to have you on the show, because I also think parents with their kids with that book is a really powerful tool. I think if parents read the book, if the children read the book, and then they worked together through it and put it into their context, because, you know, you and I know that everybody's context is totally different, but there's bits that you can pick out that can apply to you.
So what's lovely is I often get parents, when they buy the book from my website, they'll buy 2 copies. So they buy a book for their teen because it's a workbook. So the idea is it's full of notes and scribbles, and people have filled in all the sections. So we want that to feel like a safe place for the young athlete to be able to put their stuff down without thinking mum or dad are going to read it. But then the parent also wants something so that they know what their child is doing, but they can also learn some of those techniques too. And before it went off to the printers, we did send copies to lots of teens to kind of get their feedback and to make sure, because for me, I've only got a 5-year-old. So it's quite hard to know if you're always talking in the right language. And I love working with teens because they teach me so many new words. All the kind of urban stuff that helps make me feel a lot younger, they teach me. But it was great to be able to send it out to them and get their feedback. And one of the most popular things they wanted was a sheet in there that they could kind of give to their parents to go, this is how I would like you to behave when I am competing. So that's what we added in for them. Like, yeah, this is how I want you to be. Because some kids say, I want mum watching me all of the time. And others are like, oh, if my mum's there, it just makes me feel so much more stressed and I'm worried. I wanted to go to the cafe. I want to know she's nearby. I like the fact that we get to chat in the car, but I can't handle her watching me. And having a piece of paper you can give and saying, this is what would help. Parents like it because they haven't had to have that tricky conversation. But the kids are also like, yeah, can you do this? I'm like, yeah, great, let's do that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's very funny in our workshops. We will say to parents, you need to go and ask your kids these questions. And actually, one of the best ones is when you've done some work with the parents, but then the parent and the child together, and you know the conversation's gone on. Nobody can hear, but there's nowhere to hide. Because I think as a parent, some of those questions, they're not tricky questions, but I think the fear of the responses are potentially tricky. You know,
yeah.
even now with my younger ones, if I sort of said, you know, what do you want from me, you know, on game day, or how can I best support you? The fear that would be like, well, it'd be good if you were nowhere near would absolutely terrify me, you know. But yeah, I think, go on.
I was going to say, I have yet to meet a parent of an athlete I've worked with who genuinely did not want the best for their kids. They just want them to have fun. They want them to enjoy it. They want them to learn some brilliant lessons. They want them to get healthier and stay fit and meet loads of friends. They want their kids doing sport for the right reasons. That doesn't always mean their children will get those messages. And I've regularly worked with children who do fear that their parents want results from them, and they almost want payback for what they've invested in their sport. And I will have had kids that are like, I don't want to do it really anymore, but I cannot tell my mom. She has driven me to every practice session. She stood on the sidelines for all those years. They've paid for every kit. They've paid for every team trip. I can't do it to her. It matters so much. Yeah. And that's a really difficult conversation because there's no autonomy from the child that they still want to do it anymore. And they need that autonomy in order to to push themselves as hard as they need. And the parent would probably be mortified if they had that, because they genuinely just want a happy child. And so I've actually sat in some of those conversations and kind of facilitated the conversation, because it feels like such a big, scary thing to say to someone who's invested so much in you, I don't love this anymore.
Yeah.
But really important, because they're both going down this track where that communication's not been there and nobody's happy as a result.
No, absolutely. I mean, you've touched on a few things there, and sort of smiling away, because I think some of our workshops with parents, and we have a slide, and you'll like this, where your child is not a commodity, because the reality is this. And when you work with organizations around sort of, I guess, positive parent cultures or whatever they may be, parents almost are expecting a return on their money. But when you talk to parents, it's like, but we're not dealing in stocks and shares here. We're dealing with human beings. So what is the return? And you touched on it. When you ask the question to parents, what do you want your kid to gain from the sporting experience? And I asked this of 3 wishes, let's say, and pretend to be the Aladdin in the lamp, which I'm certainly not. But you ask that question, and everything is based around those life skills. I want them to feel good about themselves. I want them to feel part of a team. I want them to develop some resilience. I want them to be self-organized, and all those skills you talk about. Now, the challenge, and I'm really conscious of this as a sports parent, even though I live and breathe this every day, the challenge is making sure that our children understand that they're as equally as important as the outcome, or they understand that that's what we also value. Because it's so easy for us to get sucked into, well, were you winning? Were you scoring? Were you the best player? Because that's almost what lots of people are doing inadvertently, even though they're not necessarily thinking that. It's a natural reaction in the sporting environments we find ourselves in.
It's an easy language to use. Scores, results, outcomes. I work with a lot of adults that still struggle with this area. If you play tennis and you have a tennis match and you go in the changing rooms or for a coffee afterwards and someone says, how did you do? Really hard not to say I won or I lost. And actually it's often homework I will give with adults and youth athletes. Do not tell anyone the score or the outcome of your competition. Pick what you think is more important. And we'll often do that around work, around values. So when we do values work with people, and a lot of the values are in the book, we will come out at the end with 3 values, the things that actually matter to them, not scores and results, but the actual things that matter, like fairness or respect or achievement or challenge. And we will start to try and shape the conversation, the narrative they have around their sport in line with the values rather than in line with the easy metrics. And that it's very tricky to do to start with, but it's actually a really fun challenge of like, can I play a tennis match and not tell anyone how I did? Yeah. And can I kind of, because most of the time almost all the time, people don't care whether you won or lost. They're making nice small talk. It's like an easy conversation to have afterwards. But if you come off, say, a golf course, and it's like, how was it out there? Instead of saying, oh, I got round in X amount of shots, you say, oh, that 11th hole always gets me. But did you see that squirrel that was playing? Like, it's something fun, something different. You change the narrative. You move it away from being about results. And I often work with schools where we will try and change that conversation in a school so that sport becomes about everybody getting involved. The school does better in sport because, one, everybody is involved. So things like results go up when you've got more people being active. But you've also got more people trying more sports. So you will find the naturally talented people that want to play those sports, and you'll do better against your competitors. But when I'm working with schools, we will really try hard. Do not give the results in assembly on a Monday morning. Don't go into Monday morning assembly and say, I know, the first 11 beat so-and-so, because that's irrelevant. Go in and say the first 11 did us proud at the weekend, and I am super impressed with Thomas, who did this, this, and this. And pull out the other things, the values that say matter to the school. Most schools have a great values list. What are those things? And how do you highlight that through the sport so that we move the narrative away from did you win or lose?
It's brilliant to hear. It's such a difficult piece, isn't it? Trying to shift that narrative. I was thinking of a couple of things recently when I was director of sport in a school for 15 years, and I got better as time went on. I think when you first start, and I talked a lot to coaches about this, when you're younger and you're fighting your corner, it's all about an outcome, because you need, until you've established a reputation and everybody knows you, it's very hard, particularly with people in an environment, to get them on side around the wider picture. But as time went on, you begin to shift and you become more comfortable in your own skin, and then you start doing things for the right reasons with the greater narrative. But I still remember, similar to what you've said there, boys would come back from matches and I would see them in the driver and I would say to them, so, you know, how was today? Very similar question to, oh, well, we lost. No, that wasn't the question. The question was, how was today? And you tried to do it where parents could sort of hear it, but it isn't just necessarily parent and child either, because what you've said there, assembly, you see that on social media as well. I was talking to a swimming club last night about it, and they acknowledge this. They've got some really good values. They drive those values. They tell the parents that we're about development and these are important. And yet you go on the social media feed and the only people that are ever mentioned are the performance squad. And it's all about outcomes. So we're trying to do the right things, but we haven't quite joined up organization, coach, parent, all onto the same page, which will always be the challenge, I guess. But it's nice to hear that people are trying to shift everybody's narrative.
They are. I mean, I work with some brilliant schools, and it's really heartening to see they're doing this, but it is insidious. Even I got the school newsletter from my daughter's school the other day, and she's only 5, and that had all the football club results in it. And you're like, I'm already that parent. I can't go and complain quite yet. No. I'll have to give it a little bit of time before I go in and try and tackle that one. But you just feel your blood rising of like, oh, don't do this to them. They're only little. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Even when you're big, it doesn't matter. No. The first book I wrote was actually for sports psychologists and coaches. It's called Performing Under Pressure, and it was to help coaches be much more psychologically informed and to learn some of the basic mental skills we use. But I actually started that by talking about the Latin root for the word competition, which was never around beating people. The Latin root of the word competition is to strive to do better together. And when we kind of really focus on that, we all do better if we all work harder, if we all go faster, we all go higher, we all achieve more. And you get people talking about kind of, oh, you're being very woke, wanting to get rid of competition. It's like, it's not, competition's brilliant, but competition where it helps us all be better and work harder and try and discover new tactics and practice brilliant skills. Not about the only benefit of it being whether I won or I lost.
Yeah, and I think this leads to the challenges that we see in youth sport around people comparing with other children, which is a fruitless task, and having that, you know, and it does, and you see it all the time. That comparison trap's a real danger for lots of parents. And you know I talk lots about concentrate on your own child's journey, help them get to the top of their ladder, help them fulfill their potential, not what the person next to you is doing, not what they've done it. But you know, sport has got that amazing ability though, hasn't it, for us all just to compare, that we want this. So you go.
It's easy enough to compare anyway when you're looking at times and distances and scores. And then we throw social media into the mix, which I'm so glad we didn't have when I was little. And I really feel for kids, because you can have done a lot of work on yourself to really care about what you do and how you're doing and be in a good place. And then you look at Instagram or TikTok, and there's so much impression management. Someone may have taken 100 pictures to get a shot of them looking super fit and healthy. But our brain translates that into, they're going to beat us. They're doing better than me. I'm a failure. And we get that just from one picture of someone we see as a bit of a competitor. You scroll through and everyone looks like that. That's really hard.
Yeah, I think it'd take me more than 100 pictures, Joseph, to look fit and healthy. Now we've touched on it. I mean, we said before that I think the mental side of sport can be overlooked by people. What can we do to encourage coaches, teachers, parents to have a greater awareness of this piece? You know, if we take a big picture view of this, what can we try and do to try and shift the mindset on this, do you think?
So I would say the more they talk about kind of a scale in psychology of where you might have support. One end, you might kind of have serious psychiatric disorders, through to kind of what we're supposed to do, which was performance psychology, helping people thrive. The really positive, you're doing absolutely fine, and this is a bunch of skills that will help you do better. So I would say, and we tend to work obviously at that end. Sometimes when we've got extra training, we might work on particularly around anxiety, particularly around performance anxiety. And I would say most people come and see us because they've got some kind of performance anxiety, low confidence issue going on. Actually, the more you can incorporate basic mental skills into the work you're doing, the better, because everybody benefits from that. Nobody loses out when you've learned how to set goals better, when you've learned how to properly relax and recover after training, when you've learned how to do imagery really well. So I'd say the first thing is learn some really good mental skills that you can pass on. The second thing would be that really trying to embed a process over outcome approach. It should all be about doing the processes, the tasks, the actions with mastery as well as you possibly can, so that the outcomes kind of take control of themselves, but you don't need to focus on them. And the third one is probably quite specific, and I don't go into it in the book very much, but it's around emotional vocabulary and really having good emotional literacy. So we talk in schools a lot about kind of physical literacy, but I would love us to have much better emotional literacy. So we tend to have, I'm not going to remember which ones they are, but we tend to have about 7 emotions we talk about a lot. Angry, sad, happy, surprised. They're all kind of the basic emotions. The problem is we often have like a coping mechanism attached to each emotion. So if I am angry, I will go for a run. I will work off that anger through using energy in some way. And that can be effective. But angry is a huge span of different emotions that we tend to give one word to. If we actually look at all the types of angry words, we can be much more effective with the coping mechanisms that we have. So if I am envious of somebody, I don't know, I scroll through Twitter and I see another sports psychologist has got a brilliant opportunity that I'd have loved, I might get envious. If I've only got a very small vocabulary, I might say, oh, I'm angry about that. I'll go for a run. It's not going to fix my problem at all. Might get me a bit fitter, but it won't fix my problem. Whereas if I can look at it and go, I'm really envious, I can pull it apart. What am I envious about? Is it that I wanted to work with that group of people? Is it that it's a high profile thing? Is it that they're paid well? I can actually then start to dissect it and work out how to make a decision in what I do that will help me get closer to what I want. So there's something really nice. Parents can go straight onto Google and download this, and it's called an emotional wheel. And it has, I think, about 130 different emotions on it. And then when you start to read the emotions around the outside, the more specific ones, you can start to have much better coping mechanisms. You can have really good conversations with your kids about how they respond to things. Similarly, I've got a pack of cards I use with young athletes, and I think there's about 50, 60 emotions on there. And we lay them all out on the floor. And we're like, which are the emotions you tend to have the most? And they can pick out, say, 6 of them. These are the ones that seem to rule my life. If you're doing that with your child, it's very helpful because you start to see kind of what's ruling them, what's living in their head and pushing their behaviors. But you can also then have conversations around, okay, when you tend to feel like this, what's your go-to thing? Well, it's to go on TikTok and endlessly scroll through things. Okay, is that helpful to where you want to go in life? No, it's a complete waste of my time. The average kid that uses TikTok spends 54 minutes a day on there. What could they do with those 54 minutes a day if they were doing something more productive? So you can have then good conversations about, well, what would be a better thing for you to do that gets you towards where you want to go? And you can start to dissect. And the more you use that vocabulary in your day-to-day life, the healthier it can be. So some parents I've worked with will have a picture of that emotional wheel on their fridge. And you can kind of say, right, how are you feeling today? And it just helps you have those conversations around feelings in a way that means you can have much healthier conversations in your household than good or bad, bored. So I would say that's probably the third thing, that if you are working with children in any way, giving them a wider vocabulary that they can start to draw from, so they are better at describing how they feel, which means you can help them get really good mechanisms for the ways they are feeling, is super helpful.
Yeah, and I mean, there's I guess when you say, yeah, I agree with you that I'm so pleased we didn't grow up with social media than they've got it, but we didn't grow up with any support on that. So we've had to grow up.
True.
Yeah, so we've had to grow up as a generation of, oh, well, this is how you feel, try something, and regardless of the ramifications, try something else the next time. So actually, yes. I was listening to that, and for once I was sort of not stumped for words, but I actually shut up, because I was thinking, oh my goodness, you could apply that to even adults now. You have dialogue with children. You sat there and you're thinking, goodness, a couple of things you've just said there, and I'm like, yeah, that's how I feel sometimes. That's exactly how I would react to that. And actually, it always amazes me, I think, in the sports field, I think a lot of us can be guilty of assumption that people know some of these things. I was just sitting listening to you and thinking, that's really cool. I might have sort of known a little bit in the back of my mind, but actually you brought it to the forefront. But when I talk to coaches and NGBs or people running programs, not everybody has got a sports background. Not everybody's got the sports science degree. Not everybody's been involved in coaching or has been involved in education. And I think sometimes we assume that things that we take for granted or openly have a nice chat about, that the person in the middle, in the middle of Manchester will also know that, and they don't. And I think that we've all got to do a better job of painting a far better picture around those sporting experiences, particularly at the younger stages, on what it looks like, and provide some more information. Not so that everybody's always got to agree with you, because that will never happen either, but at least providing a space where they've got a chance to think about it, maybe reflect and adapt to suit their circumstances and needs, because it's so valuable when we provide those opportunities for people, and people are really grateful for it.
Yeah, and so a lot of the techniques, I guess I use all the normal sports psychology techniques, but I will also take a lot from clinical psychology, because I think, particularly after the last 18 months, nearly 2 years now, life's been really tricky for everybody. Nobody's had it really, really easy. And the threshold for triggering stress, anxiety feels like it's lowered a lot. It feels like it's much easier to be triggered into not feeling brilliant right now. So the more we can take some of those techniques and think about how do I make life a little bit easier for myself and for those I'm with, either my kids or the people I'm coaching, how do I give them the language to talk about those kind of things, is so helpful. And so, yeah, we don't just use it for kids. You can particularly use it if people are quite shy and quite quiet, you don't have to have a difficult conversation. You can literally give somebody that wheel and go, point at how you're feeling today. We used to use, there's a book we have when my daughter was much smaller called How Do I Feel Today? And it had, I think, 12 little pictures at the front of different emotions. And if she was having a tantrum or she was struggling with something, we'd say, point. And she could just point at a picture. And it was a brilliant way of communicating, this is what's going on. but I haven't got the words or the knowledge right now to be able to say this out loud. So the more, like, maybe this comes from my comms background, the more we can communicate with people and put across what matters to us, and realize they will have entirely different values that drive what they do. They will have different backgrounds and different explanations, but at least having that conversation can make everybody's life so much easier.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Do you see any difference in the teenagers you work with? Because I'm just thinking about this from an adult perspective, that the girls are better at this than the boys, or do you think the boys value it? Because I think people are listening to us today, and particularly males of my generation, or males growing up, where you didn't really talk about things like this because you sort of got on with it. And I've got so much better, the last five years, but I wouldn't have dreamt of even maybe having the dialogue we're having today around some of these things, but I'm far more comfortable talking in that language. Do you see anything with that back in teenagers, or do you think boys and girls are similar?
I mean, it's a small cohort, I guess, but I don't see differences in that way. What I do notice, and this is hard from a business perspective to a therapeutic perspective, is that when parents have wanted their children to come along to have sessions, the first session's just like, let's find out what's going on. The second session, we start to get a bit deeper. And often they won't want to come back because it's hard. Where parents, it sounds awful, where they pay up front for a package of sessions, and so almost like the child doesn't really have that much reason not to come back. I've paid for this, you're going. They end up opening up. They have a huge amount to say, and they are able to, they will look at a clinic floor covered with cards and be able to actually pull out and have some really good conversations, some really open, vulnerable conversations about how they're feeling. And we can do some brilliant work. And at the end, they'll be like, I really benefited from that. But it's hard. Yeah. And that's why it might be easier for coaches, because sometimes kids will be coming back because they like the sport bit. If they're coming back to me, they're only coming back to sit and talk about things that are hard. And so it can be much easier not to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think lots of us are certainly guilty of that in our lives, of hiding, and just it's easier not to have those difficult conversations. Now, a couple of things we've already talked about, I know that you're sort of passionate about from the book, based around performance anxiety, our identities being too closely linked to our sport and being the only thing that we sort of identify ourselves with, and our attachment to it. What do you think we can do before we get to that stage? When I think about early sport and people getting into it, heading towards the teenagers, what do you think parents can be doing in those early stages to try to make sure that their children don't suffer performance anxiety, or have a good awareness of making sure that their child's identity isn't just linked to their sporting prowess, let's say? Have you got any tips for parents?
So I would say it links back to what we were talking about earlier about the process elements and not the outcomes. So this is what I'm going to try and do with my daughter. I do. I'll succeed.
I can't wait to get you back on this.
God, in 10 years' time when I'm with my hair up.
I can't wait for this, because we've all been through it, and I live and breathe this every day.
And she has been, I'm going to touch wood, she's been the easiest child you can imagine. She's always slept. She's always been calm. Like, compared to what I've seen with other people, we've had a very, very easy time of it, which I am guaranteed by everybody means she's going to be a nightmare teenager, and I'm going to get my comeuppance. So yes, I'll come back in 10 years. With
great chat.
No hair left, and I'm very upset.
Yeah.
But what I would like to try and do is never ask her about the outcome, but always focus on the processes. So, and we do this already. She does ballet, she does parkour, she does drama. So we do already, but of what did you enjoy about it today? Who did you enjoy playing with? What did you learn? And we will really focus as well. With the athletes I work with, they get an analysis sheet for every single competition they have. And it doesn't have on there result, but it has, what did I do well? What could I have done better? What will I carry on doing? What will I change? Action I am taking into training this week. So they get a bit of autonomy and ownership of what they're doing. So the more you focus on those things and the less you focus on outcome, that really starts to pick up with my parents don't care about the result. My parents care about me. And I think that message, you can never have too much of that message. And so the more we can highlight it's about the benefits you get from sport. And there was a really lovely piece of research I found when I was writing the book, which had the top 100 reasons that kids do sport. The result, the win, I think was 81st on that list.
Yeah, but it's Amanda Vissek's work, isn't it? Because
brilliant. I was just like, amazing. But yeah, you get to kind of 13, 14, and suddenly it's all about the results. And then surprisingly, loads of kids drop out. So the longer we can keep it about not being about results and what do you get from it, and maybe parents could look through that kind of list and go, what values do I have that I can transfer into my children from that list? What are the important things I think about sport? Is it the friendships you make? Is it the fact you learn how to master something by trying and trying again? And think through, well, what matters to me? Those are the bits that I'm going to emphasize. Those are the questions I'm going to ask. And you almost want your kids rolling their eyes when you ask the questions, because they know what's coming. Yeah, mum, blah, blah, blah. But in rolling their eyes, in having that sarcasm with it, they have sunk in. This is what matters to them. This is what should matter to me.
Yeah.
And the more we can do of that, the more we take it away from outcomes. And did you have fun today?
Yeah.
What did you learn? Those bits, how do they have brilliant stories from what they do? So I had a triathlon earlier this year. July, should have been beautiful hot weather. It was torrential. My poor daughter ended up 5 hours in the rain, in mud. Not the experience I wanted to give her of triathlon at all. But what she remembers from that day is that it was so muddy we had to get towed out of the car park by a tractor. Yeah. That was super exciting. And I kind of, that's what we should, kids sports stuff should be about, the experiences and the journeys. And from going to dance school as a kid, what I remember are the trips that we did and the camps and the shows that we gave. I could not tell you a single one of my ballet, tap or modern scores from my exams. I can't even tell you what grades I really got to. But I can tell you about the trip we took to France. And I can tell you when we went to do a performance for some big concert at one of the Hyde Park hotels. I've still got friends that I danced with. I can tell you the costumes I had. What the process of doing it kept me fit and healthy and hopefully improved my posture and taught me loads of things. But it's the experiences and the stories that we will capture and take with us through life. Yeah. Not whether I got a merit in my elementary ballet exam.
Yeah, absolutely. That work of Amanda Vissek, I use quite a lot because I think that it fascinates me, the list, because when you look at that list, everybody's definition of fun's going to be different. Now, for some people, it will be winning, we can't get away from that. But generally, when they were asked, as you say, playing in a tournament and winning is absolutely miles down the list. They don't even rank highly at all. Yeah, I was thinking back to when I put my children into sport, and playing in a tournament and winning with my son, I think was a top 5 answer. Now, I coach competitively and was involved in reasonably elite sport. And that was like, yeah, well, that must be why we're playing, because surely that's what sport's all about. Now, that's because of my background and my context. And I remember him going off to Germany to play in a football tournament. He was very fortunate at the age of 9. We weren't allowed to go. It was parent free. He was playing for a top football club, and he went off to Germany for the weekend. We were terrified as mum and dad. about, what was happening. We didn't really know the people, and we were just glad to get him back on the Monday. And when he came back on Monday, all I wanted to know was, how good were Bayern Munich? How good were Borussia Dortmund? How good, in my mind, I wanted to know how these top European football teams compared. So I got him in the car, but I did the right thing. You'll be pleased to know, Josie said, how was you, but that was in the back of my mind. And I said, how was your weekend? He said, what was the best bit? And he said, Dad, the hotel was beautiful. Yeah. He said, Dad, it was a Novotel. I think we should stay in one of those when we get older. So that was question one. I'm like, okay, right, Archie, that's brilliant. I'm really glad you enjoyed the hotel. What else did you enjoy? Thinking that we'd get to the football. And he said, Dad, the sausages, they were brilliant. Right, so I did this parenting thing where I started talking about sausages from Germany, paella from Spain, pasta from Italy. I did our sort of culinary trip around the world and said, really good, Germans are known for the sausages. I'm glad you enjoyed that. And I thought, I'm bound to, on the third one, get Archie, you're going to tell me about the football. I said, so what else was good? He said, Dad, the hair gel I use is muck. And I said, what do you mean? He said, my mate, his mum's a hairdresser. My roommate and the stuff I've got's rubbish. So he came home and got this after about 20 minutes. It was yeah. I said, oh, for goodness sake, Archie, how was the football? He said, I was captain on Saturday and scored a last-minute goal against Hanover. And I sat there and I tell that story, and it's like, it just sums up beautifully how our perceptions of sport as adults can sometimes be so different to how our kids view it and what they're seeing. And I'm just conscious of time, leading on to this final topic. And I know, again, something that you talk a lot about is this idea of autonomy and giving our children some autonomy around their sporting experience, because the data shows us that lots of children drop out in their teenage years. I think that
the newer data shows they start to drop out from the age of 7.
Okay, and that's probably because everything's got earlier and earlier and earlier.
Yeah,
so things earlier. So, from my point of view around that is, I think when we're parents earlier on in our children's journey, when they rely on us a lot more, or they actually believe what we tell them a bit more, that we sort of shift and cajole and control, and they do it because we're taking them and we tell them that's what they're doing. And yet, obviously, later on, when we get to sort of 13, 14, and then they think that we know nothing about the world at all, and they start making their own choices, that's when they start to potentially drop out. And we've got to understand, haven't we, early on, that they've got to have a real choice and ownership of their experience if we expect them to continue in that sport for a lot longer, even though we haven't got a crystal ball.
And it's interesting, when I do the values work with young athletes, one of the words in there is autonomy, and almost all of them will go, what's that mean? And I'm like, it's having a choice and a voice over what you do. And I love that phrase, because I think it describes it so well in a way that a team's going to get. And then they're like, do I have a choice over my sport? Do I have a voice in how we do it? And one of the things I will often try and get them to do when they're trying to get a little bit of that autonomy, but they're still stuck by the fact they're teens, they've got to go to school, they can't yet drive, they still need mum and dad to pay for things and take them places, is I will at least start trying to get them to enter their own competitions and to start taking over some of the admin around their sport. And parents often like that too, because it's like, fine, takes some of the effort off me. But it's like, okay, if they're going to do it, give them, say, a credit card that they spend on team entries, competition entries, give them the diary, tell them what else is in it. But they start to kind of go, is that a good competition for me to do or not? Because when they get there, they're not sitting in the car doing that. I don't want to do this. I really don't want to be here. I hate this type of competition. I'm playing, I know, Sarah, and Sarah's always cheating. They've chosen to do it. They've owned it. They had a voice over whether they did it. And that's much harder for them to kind of go, I don't want to do this. It's not on mum and dad anymore. It's on them. And similarly with some brilliant research they do where they put GoPros in cars and they film the conversations in tennis between parents and kids on the way to tennis matches. And it's fascinating to watch kids' faces when their parents are telling them certain things. So
I've certainly had parents that have said, particularly in sports like tennis, it's so expensive, we can't afford lots of coaching. So I've learned how to coach instead, and I coach them. And my heart sinks because I'm like, they need a parent. They don't need a coach. They need you to be a parent for them. And you can see when they do those kind of film things, if a parent starts giving coaching advice, they've shut off, nothing on their face. They are not listening.
No.
But if you can say, if you can get them to think about the right things, brilliant. So, was there anything your coach suggested you should be working on at this weekend's tournament? Brilliant. You can have a decent conversation around that. But as you say, 13, 14, mum and dad don't know anything. They've not lived in this world. They've never had a proper competition. They don't get my sport, even if you're a world champion in it. It's about, at that point, it's really hard because they've listened to you up till then. And you probably do know quite a lot about their sport. You've stood on the sidelines, or you've taken in everything. You've been on forums. You've chatted to every other parent. But it's so important for parents to take that step back and do that. I'm being a parent right now. I'm not being a pseudo coach. I have to take that step back. I have to let them own it. They have to feel like this is theirs, because if it's not, they won't want to do it. And if you don't want to do it, you don't put everything into it, and it's a complete waste of time. You might as well be doing something entirely different.
Yeah, and I think what a lovely way to finish this episode. A couple of key messages there to finish. Be the parent, not the coach. And that amazing saying there, make sure you're giving your children a choice and a voice. Josie Perry, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Parents in Sport podcast. Thank you for joining us this morning. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again soon.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Check us out at parentsinsport.co.uk.